evening. I'll call the meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing for our invocation. Pastor Adele Resmer from New Journey Lutheran Church is here with us this evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. All who are here this evening seek to do good work and to represent fairly those who have given them this task as town council members. So may their efforts be blessed with insights, guided by understanding and wisdom. May they seek to serve with respect for all. May their personal faiths give them strength to act honestly and well in the matters before them. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Roll call, please, Bev.
Mayor Kavanaugh,
Here.
Vice Mayor DePorter,
Here.
Councilmember Brown,
Here.
Councilmember Hanson,
Here.
Councilmember Yates,
Present.
Councilmember Magazine,
Here.
Councilmember Lachey.
Here.
Okay, we are just loaded with proclamations today. We have 4 for the month of October. So I will start with Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and I hope as you came in the building, you saw the giant domestic violence purple ribbon that one of our staff members made. Was it, who made it, Nita?
It was Nita.
Nita, okay, made those for all of our entrance doors. And we're also going to be having purple lights on the roof, and we're all wearing purple ribbons. And we're also registered with the governor's office as part of the entire state Stop Domestic Violence Month. And here is our proclamation. Whereas home should be a place of warmth, unconditional love, tranquility, and security. And whereas for most of us, home and family can indeed be counted among our greatest blessings. And whereas tragically for many Americans, these are blessings that are tarnished by violence and fear. And whereas women, men, young children, and the elderly are all counted among the victims of domestic violence. And whereas physical injury and deaths occur and emotional scars are often permanent. And whereas law enforcement officials, shelters, hotline services, healthcare providers, the clergy, and concerned citizens are helping in the effort to end domestic violence. And whereas we must recognize the compassion and dedication of these volunteers and professionals, applaud their efforts, and increase public understanding of this important problem. Whereas the Town Council approved Resolution 2013-44 on August 15, 2013, expressing support for the, quote, Start by Believing campaign, end quote, through the End Violence Against Women International Organization. Now, therefore, I, Linda M. Kavanaugh, Mayor of the Town of Fountain Hills, Arizona, do hereby proclaim this month of October as Domestic Violence Awareness Month in Fountain Hills, and urge all citizens to observe this month by becoming aware of the tragedy of domestic violence and supporting community efforts working towards its end. And Councilman Cecil Yates is our representative on the Domestic Violence Committee with the Maricopa Association of Governments. Do you want to say anything?
No, I'll have
No?
a full report next
Next.
council meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, next we have a proclamation for Fire Prevention Awareness Month. Whereas the Town of Fountain Hills, Arizona is committed to ensuring the safety and security of all those living in and visiting Fountain Hills. And whereas fire is a serious public safety concern both locally and nationally, and homes are where people are at greatest risk from fire. And whereas U.S. fire departments responded to 369,500 home fires in 2014, according to the National Fire Protection Association. And whereas U.S. home fires resulted in 2,745 civilian deaths in 2014, representing the majority, 84%, of all U.S. fire deaths. And whereas in 1/5 of all homes with smoke alarms, the smoke alarms are not working. And whereas 3 out of 5 home fire deaths result from fires in properties without smoke alarms, 38%, or with no working smoke alarms, 21%. And whereas working smoke alarms cut the risk of dying in reported home fires in half. And whereas many Americans don't know how old the smoke alarms are in their homes or how often they need to be replaced. And whereas all smoke alarms should be replaced at least once every 10 years. And whereas the age of a smoke alarm can be determined by the date of its manufacture, which is marked on the back of the smoke alarm. And whereas Fountain Hills first responders are dedicated to reducing the occurrence of home fires and home fire injuries through prevention and protection education. And whereas Fountain Hills residents are responsive to public education measures and are able to take personal steps to increase their safety from fire, especially in their homes. And whereas the 2016 Fire Prevention Week theme, quote, "Don't wait, check the date, replace smoke alarms every 10 years," end quote, effectively serves to educate the public about the vital importance of replacing the smoke alarms in their homes at least every 10 years, and to determine the age of their smoke alarms by checking the date of manufacture on the back of the alarms. Therefore, I, Linda M. Kavanaugh, Mayor of Fountain Hills, do hereby proclaim October 9 to 15, 2016, as Fire Prevention Week throughout Fountain Hills. I urge all Fountain Hills residents to find out how old the smoke alarms are in their homes, to replace them if they are more than 10 years old, and to participate in the many public safety activities and efforts of Fountain Hills Fire and Emergency Services during Fire Week 2016. Okay. Our third proclamation is for National Red Ribbon Week. And actually, Grady and I participated in the coalition meeting this morning, and then we went into the gymnasium of the middle school, and they had all these different activities for Red Ribbon Day. Our town also participated. We had a table there. Our staff member, Angelica Giordino, had a table explaining to the students about the effects of smoking and emphysema. And there were various tables for anti-drug, alcohol, and tobacco. Whereas alcohol and drug abuse in this nation have reached epidemic stages, and whereas it is imperative that visible, unified prevention education efforts by community members be launched to eliminate the demand for drugs, and whereas the East Valley Young Marines, the local unit of the United States Young Marines, is a youth education and service program for boys and girls that focuses on promoting the mental, moral, and physical development of its members, including character building, leadership, and encouraging a healthy, drug-free lifestyle. Whereas the Young Marines is the official youth program of the United States Marine Corps and is the focal point for the U.S. Marine Corps youth drug demand reduction efforts and is open to youth ages 8 through high school completion who are in good standing in their school. And whereas the National Red Ribbon Campaign and the East Valley Young Marine Program offers citizens the opportunity to demonstrate their commitment to drug-free lifestyles, no use of illegal drugs, and no illegal use of legal drugs. And whereas the National Red Ribbon Campaign will be celebrated in every community in America during Red Ribbon Week, October 23rd to the 31st, 2016. Whereas business, government, parents, law enforcement, media, medical institutions, religious institutions, schools, senior citizens, service organizations, and youth will demonstrate their commitment to healthy, drug-free lifestyles by wearing and displaying red ribbons during this week-long campaign. And whereas the town of Fountain Hills further commits its resources to ensure the success of the Red Ribbon campaign. Whereas October 23rd to the 31st, 2016 has been designated National Red Ribbon Week, which encourages Americans to wear a red ribbon to show their support for a drug-free environment. Now therefore, I, Linda M. Kavanaugh, Mayor of Fountain Hills, do hereby proclaim October 23rd to the 31st, 2016 as Red Ribbon Week, and encourage its citizens to participate in drug prevention education activities, not only during Red Ribbon Week, but all year long, making a visible statement that we are strongly committed to a drug-free Fountain Hills. Okay, and we have one more, and that is for our very own Make a Difference Day.
Mayor, if I may, we had some guests here who were here for this particular proclamation that you just read.
Oh, I didn't know that. I'm sorry, I didn't know you were here for that. Okay, do you want to use the mic so everybody can hear you? Okay. And state your name and who you are.
I am Corporal Hayden Lippincott of the East Valley Young Marines, and I would like to thank you, Ms. Linda, Mayor of Fountain Hills, for the proclamation and the efforts that you guys have put in for the Red Ribbon Week.
Okay. Well, thank you, and thank you for your dedication to the Young Marines.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for joining us. We can give you a nice copy. Yeah. We'll send you a nice copy.
There's no charge.
We'll get something nice for you that you can save.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for joining us. Well, that was extra special. Okay. All right, our last proclamation is for our own Make a Difference Day. Whereas serious social problems concern our nation, state, and town and threaten our future, and whereas connecting with others and working together through volunteer service can bridge the differences that separate people and help solve serious social problems, and whereas we, the American people and the residents of Fountain Hills, have a tradition of philanthropy and volunteerism, and whereas in 2015, over almost 5 million people cared enough about their communities to volunteer on Make a Difference Day, accomplishing thousands of projects in hundreds of cities and towns. Whereas in our community, nonprofit organizations, schools, businesses, houses of worship, families, neighborhoods, and friends serve together to make a difference. And whereas 2016 makes the 8th year for Fountain Hills to demonstrate that it is the small town with the big heart. And whereas the town of Fountain Hills supports a vibrant community to enrich the lives of our residents. Whereas I, Linda M. Kavanaugh, Mayor of the town of Fountain Hills, Arizona, do hereby proclaim October 22nd, 2016 as Make a Difference Day in Fountain Hills, and urge all residents to participate in volunteer projects as we work together to meet the needs of our neighbors. Anybody, as individuals who would like to volunteer, contact Heather at Town Hall. And if you happen to be a business and you would like to donate a service for Make a Difference Day, also contact Heather, because we're also looking for business sponsors. Okay. Oh, I'm not through talking. Now I've got to go on to economic development. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to talk about our Greater Phoenix Economic Council meeting This was our budget meeting. We in Fountain Hills have a small investment in that, but we still want to make sure that the money is being used wisely. So it is important for me to be there to go over their budget. A new endeavor for Greater Phoenix Economic Council is our involvement with companies dealing with smart sensors. These are the sensors that are being used in medical devices, computer watches, Fitbits, smart homes, and many more. GPEC is trying to stay well ahead of the curve in technology, knowing that these new companies will be looking for locations. ASU and our community colleges are partnering with GPEC in promoting curriculum based around the smart sensors. And under economic development, I also want to announce that we did have the grand opening of Bell's Outlet Store. About 750 people waited outside for the doors to open. If you haven't checked it out, please do so. Remember, if we want this business to remain in town, we have to support it. The manager did assure me that they will be changing the merchandise on a weekly basis so you can stop in often. I want to do a big shout out to our Economic Development Director, Scott Cooper, for his hard work to help negotiate that spot in the Target Center for Bell's while simultaneously relocating the dollar store so we wouldn't lose that one. That's all thanks to our Scott Cooper. And that's my report for today. So you're either happy about Bell's or you're glad I stopped talking. One or the other. That was probably the most proclamations we've ever had at one meeting. We are up to call to the public. Do we have any requests to speak?
Mayor, we have one card. Carol Carroll.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Carol Carroll. I'm the newly elected chairperson of the Sister Cities Advisory Commission. And we were here, and we've given you all a little folder to remind you of who the Sister Cities are and to invite you to become members and join us at this Saturday night's event where we're dining around the world. And it'll be at the community center, and we have the caterer's word that we can get a few more people in if you want to fill out and call us tomorrow and let us know that you can come. We have a brochure in this about what's going on as well. We did have our first meeting a couple of weeks ago and coordinated schedules and elected a chair, and a co-chair is Beverly Tall. And we are going to come up with these reports for you with the agendas and events that are coming up. In October, we did the Oktoberfest. We also are doing the Dine Around Dinner. And we have the mayor of Deerdorf and of Zomash, Poland, coming into town with 24 exchange students. So they'll be around for 2 weeks for us to all get to know and go into the schools. So we wanted to introduce ourselves and thank you for the opportunity.
And this dinner is a fundraiser?
October 8th, it is a fundraiser to help pay for the agenda for the students while they're here. They're going to be in Fountain Hills, and then they're going to travel up north to the Grand Canyon.
Great. Okay, thank you. All right, next we have our consent agenda items. We have 15. Can I get a motion to accept as written?
Mayor, so moved.
In a second. And roll call, please.
Mayor Kavanaugh.
Aye.
Vice Mayor DePorter.
Aye.
Councilmember Brown.
Aye.
Councilmember Leger.
Aye.
Councilmember Magazine.
Aye.
Councilmember Hanson. Councilmember Yates.
Aye.
Mayor 7-0.
Thank you. Regular agenda item. Items 16 and 17, we have one staff report. So to begin, I will open the public hearing regarding endorsing a bingo license application for Fountain Hills Post 7507, Veterans of Foreign Wars, located at 9624 North Monterey Drive, Fountain Hills, Arizona, 85268. Grady, did you want to start?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Mayor and Council, as the Mayor indicated, before you is a request for a bingo license from the Veterans of Foreign Wars. And I'm going to go ahead and have the Finance Director just give a brief staff report on the status of this application.
Mayor and council members, the request is submitted by the VFW Post. They are looking to offer one night a month of bingo on a Saturday night, and I believe it's the third Saturday of the month. I have reached out to the Fort McDowell people to obtain their comment. Unfortunately, I did not receive any response from the people at Fort McDowell. So I would suggest that council approve the motion.
Okay. Do we have any speaker cards?
No, Mayor.
No. Any discussion from council? Any questions for staff? Vice Mayor?
Just a question, why, I think it's nice that we asked them for comment, but why did we?
My understanding was that in prior requests for bingo licenses, that council has asked if we have inquired of Fort McDowell. And so in an effort to answer that question, I did.
And it really has to do with the gambling aspects, with, you know, the fact that they have very similar types of activities over there.
Any other questions, comments? No? No speaker cards? Okay, then I will close public hearing. And consideration of endorsing a bingo license application for Fountain Hills Post 7507, Veterans of Foreign Wars, as presented. Any further council discussion? If not, I'll entertain a motion. So moved. And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mayor, 7-0.
There you go. You got it. Okay, for items 18 and 19, when again, we have one staff report. Public comment will be taken on both items. And consideration of resolution 2016-17 declaring a public record that documents filed with the town clerk and entitled the Town of Fountain Hills Noise Regulations. And I'll start with Grady or Bob.
I'll go ahead and have Bob go through his presentation. Again, several of these items are all related tonight, so what looks like individual items, they're there on the agenda for a specific reason, but we're going to go ahead and handle the staff report as one report, correct, Mr. Roberts? Rogers, sorry.
One report for the noise ordinance and then another report for the overlay district. First one's the noise. Noise regulations you have before you were the recommendations brought forth in 2010 by a noise committee appointed by the Planning and Zoning Commission. The regulations were simplified, illustrations were added, and enforcement was provided with a reasonable and easy to enforce two-part process for determining if there's a violation. This ordinance was actually initiated in 2011, but due to an upcoming event in the downtown area, the ordinance was temporarily tabled. Now fast forward, and the Planning and Zoning Commission established a second subcommittee in February of this year. Their charge was to return with recommendations for a consistent set of regulations, primarily for the downtown area, but also to take a relook at the previous committee's proposal for the noise ordinance. The second committee's presented its report on April 14th, 2016. The report recommended some minor changes to the previous proposal and also that the downtown entertainment overlay district be established in order to provide for the entire downtown area with the consistent rules regarding events and other outdoor activities. This hearing is to discuss the first of those two proposals, the noise ordinance. There are currently two noise ordinances. One's in the zoning ordinance and one's in the town code. Ordinance 1608, this proposed revision, removes the noise regulations from the zoning entirely and moves them over with Ordinance 1610 and places everything into the town code for ease of reference. The noise ordinance establishes specific, measurable, maximum decibel levels that will be allowed during specific times of the day, specific days of the week, and specific months of the year. The noise ordinance establishes an equitable two-part test to determine if and when a violation has occurred. This test requires that a decibel meter reading be taken within approximately 30 feet of the source of the noise. The test then requires that another decibel meter reading be taken at the location of the complaint. A violation is judged to have occurred if both locations register as being in excess of the permitted decibel levels. Violations have been defined as civil offenses, which, if repeated often enough, may become criminal offenses according to already established town code provisions. And there is a list of relatively standard exemptions that will include noise that is generated by an event being conducted under issued special event permits. Sorry, I have too many pages. This is the proposed decibel chart of permitted noise levels. As you can see at the top, there's a basic illustration of the two-part test requiring one reading be taken near the source of the noise and another reading be taken near the source of the complaint. The readings would both have to be in excess of the allowed level in order to be considered a violation. The table is broken into 3 sections. The top section is the summer, May through September. The middle section is the winter, which is September back to May. And then the bottom section is the weekends year-round. Note that the decibel levels are consistent. Only the times of day are changed depending on the time of year. Question that always comes up when we look at regulations like this is, what are the other towns doing? Staff reviewed 6 other ordinances, and they're all over the place. None were the same. No real consistency was found to exist between any of them. But this is a brief overview. The full ordinances were in your packets. Regarding decibel limits, as you can see, Phoenix uses a C-band scale when measuring decibels. That's different from all the others. They allow up to 70 decibels on the C-band. I'm not sure what the differences in C and A are. Tempe allows us up to 70 decibels in the A-band, but also requires that the noise be at least 5 decibels over for a violation to occur. That seems to effectively create a 75 limit. Scottsdale allows up to 68 decibels, but that's rebuttable because they don't require a decibel meter reading. Paradise Valley allows up to 56 decibels, but traffic noise may be up to 82 decibels. Mesa and the county don't have decibel limits in their codes. As regards time constraints, those are relatively consistent. Most start at 6 or 7 a.m. and they end at 10 or 11 p.m., except Scottsdale and the county, which don't list any times in their codes. As regard the measurement location, this is again all over the place. Mesa doesn't have a measurement. Phoenix says 50 feet, but only if it's a handheld device. And I'll talk about that more in the next slide. Tempe and Paradise Valley measure at the property line. Scottsdale doesn't note where to measure from. And the county says 500 feet from the source, but you have to take the reading from inside a closed building. And remember that they don't list a maximum decibel level, so it's not clear what you're supposed to be measuring. This is an overview of the exemptions from the other towns and the county. These are a bit more standardized, but there's still a wide range. All exempt municipal work and permitted events. Some of exemptions are a little more unique. Mesa and Paradise Valley allow for other exemptions at the town manager's discretion. Tempe includes trains and churches, as well as other exemptions. Scottsdale exempts noise from businesses with outdoor patios. Phoenix has an exemption for those handheld devices if they play pleasing melodies, whatever that means. The county also takes guns, boats, racing events, trains, aircraft, farm equipment, and things like that into consideration. Planning and Zoning Commission forwarded a recommendation to approve the ordinance as proposed. Because their vote was 3-2, the commission also forwarded a brief outline of their rationale for voting both for and against the proposal. That outline is included in your packets as well. In that outline, they included some noise statistics. For your general information, I created this slide using a table from their cited website. Staff believes that the proposed ordinance is superior to the current regulations in fairness, understandability, and enforceability. The staff recommends approval as presented. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Questions for Bob? And Vice Mayor?
I'm assuming the different start times in the summer months and the winter months, are those based on, because of construction?
Well, daylight, but really,
Daylight.
it's earlier in the summer.
Because everyone else had just a either no time or 7 to 10.
Yeah, a lot has to do with when the windows are open. In the cooler months, the windows are open earlier and later.
Councilman Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. Bob, I like the Friday through Sunday year-long, 7 to 11, 11 to 7. And I would like to make the recommendation opposed to having 2 different times for the winter and the summer, 5:30 to 6. We're on the start times. The summertime is 5:30 and the winter time is 6. It's a 30-minute difference. Why don't we do that as a year-long also with a 5:45 opposed to having a 30-minute break and somebody trying to determine
Yeah.
or remember what day of the year we're supposed to be changing?
The current ordinance starts at sunrise, and that changes every day. So I have no preference one way or the other.
Okay, Councilman Magazine.
Under exemptions, what's the definition of special events?
In ours, a permitted special event is an event that has a special event permit, which has been issued by the town, yes.
Okay, and under exemptions, loud voices. How is that defined? I mean, if you have a crowd of people, or if you have a party, or how is that dealt with?
I believe it's without microphones or unamplified.
I just looked at the list of exemptions, and it said loud voices.
Yeah, loud voices, well, they're not going to reach the decibel levels. And I think that was just an attempt to try to reduce the number of complaints for people having a party or something if they weren't blasting music or something, just loud voices. Like I mentioned, I think Scottsdale was the place that allows for voices and things to carry if a business is having an outdoor, patio or something like that.
Have we sent this to MCSO for review and any reaction?
No.
How do we know that, first of all, our code officer, I assume, doesn't work on weekends, is that correct?
Correct.
And so therefore, this is left to MCSO to enforce, correct?
It would be if the complaint comes in after hours.
Right.
And if I could just dovetail onto that, I've had some discussions with Captain Letourneau about this, and we would be prepared to be acquiring decibel meters so that they can properly measure these complaints, and they will have training on how to use those and on how to calibrate those, but they will be brought up to speed on whatever the council adopts.
And so he's not concerned about manpower or being able to respond in a timely fashion or anything like that? Do we know?
My understanding right now, and he's welcome to
Yes,
come
sir.
up to the podium, but my understanding is that noise has not been an ongoing issue, with the exception of a few complaints that we have received, at Copper Wind. It has not been a universal issue, but maybe if he can come up and address that.
Sure. Captain Letourneau?
Councilman, like the town manager explained, manpower would not be an issue. Probably what we would take into consideration also is what would a reasonable person say is too loud. We bring that into a lot of ARS statutes and codes and town codes and certain things like that. Would a reasonable person say it's too late, too early, or too loud? We'd bring that into the situation.
So it sounds like, and I don't have a problem with this, it sounds like the officers would use some discretion as to what
Absolutely.
the situation is.
Absolutely, just like a lot of the things that my guys do, discretion's brought in.
Okay, thank you.
And you're already called out for dog barking, and
Correct.
and you have to use discretion with that also.
Right.
Any other questions for the captain? No. No? Okay, thank you. Councilman Yates?
If I may. When this was first brought up, I was the vice chairman of Planning and Zoning and was made the chairman of this committee. And the committee that we had included a law professor and two sound experts, and then some other members of some other residents and the balance of planning and zoning commissioners. Paul Moot was part of that committee, yourself, Mr. Rogers, and of course Janice Baxter. Our whole deal with this was try to make it as uniform and no longer subjective that we could measure. We met with the Sheriff's Department, calibrated some decibel readers, and kind of went out and made some measurements. The first page, and I apologize that, Bob, you didn't get this till later, makes some comparisons on what reasonable noise is. And my only issue, along with what Councilman Brown indicated, the 55 at your home, just to put that in perspective, regular conversational speech is 60 decibels. 55 is birds chirping. 70, as you see, is just regular street traffic or a restaurant. So it's just good to kind of look at this. I'm not saying what we should or shouldn't do. I like the 85 because 85 is when OSHA kind of kicks in. And the two-tier system is an excellent way to do it because even though you may have an acoustical band playing, and it really is, 80, 85 decibels could easily be heard 10 feet away from an acoustical band. But at your home, just with your air conditioner on, would be north of 60 decibels. So 55, and this was a pretty conservative group, 55 is very low. Just a regular wind blowing and your air conditioner on, you would exceed that. So it might give a false reading. But the whole idea here was to make it uniform, something that you could read. It would not add any additional manpower other than we'd have to buy some decibel readers and probably calibrate those on some regular basis. So my only change to this, based on what you're saying, and I'm open for discussion, is on page 3 of that last handout would just change the at-home number from 55 to 65, since it is a two-part, and everything else I would leave the same.
And I had already discussed quite a bit of this with Bob myself, and thank you for meeting with me during your staff time. And the one thing that I had spoken to you about was that with the exemptions, even though the school is a government, I had wanted to add schools to that because they do have a loudspeaker, and as I mentioned, I don't really live that close to the high school, but yet I can hear all the announcements, just the way the sound travels. So with the football games and all of that, and the band practicing very early in the morning, I would like to add schools as far as the exemption goes. And that's the only comment I have. Can we go to speaker cards if we have them?
Mayor, we have 6.
Okay.
Bill
6.
Hines, followed by Mike Dickerson.
Okay, let me remind anyone who is speaking. Everybody gets 3 minutes. Keep your eye on the little box. When it hits red, that means your time is up. State your name and the town you live in.
Sure. Hi,
That's it.
Council. Nice to see everybody. Bill Hines, owner of Copperwind, live in Fountain Hills.
Thank you.
I'm going to be very brief. I'll be under my 3 minutes. My main intent in coming here, this isn't about Copperwind. This isn't, I want to make sure it's about the broader issue at hand, but how it impacts Copperwind is important to me. I like the way it was written. I have gone out and engaged a sound specialist who you will hear from tonight to tell me what does this mean for us? Can we still operate? Can we still be a resort that puts on high-end weddings and high-end corporate events? And I was told we could. So he thought it was fair. He thought it was well written, and obviously a lot of thought went into it. And that's all I was concerned about. My main reason for coming is hoping we, any changes to it, any alterations to it are really what I'm here for, because those are the things that become so painful for us. One little change here, one little change there from how it was written could be very detrimental. So I'm just here to support on behalf of Copperwind and some of the other businesses here in Fountain Hills that were able to approve this and respect the work that was done. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mike Dickerson, followed by Scott Carpenter.
My name is Mike Dickerson with MD Acoustics. I live in Gilbert, Arizona. Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members, I was retained by Copperwind to review the noise ordinance as proposed to see the impact it would have on Copperwind Resort's operations. I have provided a report in front of each one of you, and I'll be very brief so we stay within the 3-minute timeline. But basically, we did an acoustic model simulation and a 3D simulation where we held a corporate event or a wedding on the wedding lawn and had implemented the 30 feet away at 85 dB at 30 feet at the source, and then went to the nearest residence and to measure out what it would be at the structure. And as you can see, the measurements in there, there's an exhibit that shows what it would be, which would fall within the guidelines that with the ordinance as proposed. The study also does a comparison, obviously, to the other, to Paradise Valley and to Scottsdale. By the way, I do consulting with all the towns, all the cities, and help write. I haven't written any of the policy here in Arizona, but we do definitely go out and verify compliance to noise complaints. A 2-step verification process is absolutely critical, even though the cities may not say that in their ordinance. When you go out and measure, first off, you can't use your phone. That's not an appropriate tool. They are on decibel meters. Our decibel meters are anywhere in the range of $8,000 to $14,000 per meter. And we use them because they do frequency analysis. So we look at bass, mid-levels, treble. Mm-hmm. It's important to go to the source, and it's important to go to where the receptor's at to get a verification. So the code as written is something I would support in terms of that would make sense to verify if there's a complaint. This is something that can be incorporated into the town and still allow Copperwind and other resorts in the area to function normally.
Okay.
And I'm open to questions if you have any.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Dickerson.
Would you rather I wait?
Did you, yeah, let's wait till, let's get through all the technical issues. And next is
Scott Carpenter, followed by Mark Saul.
Scott Carpenter.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Scott Carpenter, I'm a lawyer. My law firm is Carpenter Hazelwood. Our offices are in Tempe. And my client is the Villas of Copperwind Association, which is unrelated to the resort, and I suppose the entity with which there is some tension over the resort. And I wanted to take my time tonight to point out a couple of things. The first is that this statute is not about the resort, it's about the entire town. And the goal here is to act in the best interest of all of the citizens and the businesses and, of course, everyone who lives here, and to try to figure out a way to get along, which is the goal. So the challenge that we have and what you have in front of you is sort of our spin on this, and I want to orient you to our visual aid here. The science of sound is actually quite straightforward. If a sound is 85 decibels at 30 feet, we can predict the sound at the source. In other words, you can back into it. The logarithm is a science to it. And so what we have calculated, certainly defer to the experts, that if something's 85 decibels at 30 feet, that means it's 115 decibels at the source. It's not 130, and by some random event, it ended up 85 at 30 feet. It's not 50 decibels at the source, and then by some random event from wind or air pressure or a storm or something like that, it ends up 85 at 30 feet. It is actually, by science, 115 at the source. And the reason this is important is because 85 is a deafening number, and I will attempt to demonstrate that in a moment. But the problem is that this is not about the resort and people who live within 30 feet. This would apply to a guy in his condo who blares music, and at 10 feet away, it would be 95 decibels and at 30 feet, it would be 85 decibels. So for the two-part test, anybody within 30 feet, if the number the number at the source would be astronomically high at 115, but it could be 95 at 10 feet, or it could be 87 or 88 at 25 feet. So the challenge is, what are we doing within the 30 feet? Also, 115 at the source at 1,000 feet would be 55 decibels. And so we've got two problems basically here. Although the sound expert suggests that it would be good to have a two-part test, our research is that none of the cities have a two-part test. In other words, you could do one measurement. And the idea that you're going to measure the same sound in two locations with one person is troubling. It's challenging for me to get my brain around how one person is going to take an $8,000 to $14,000 piece of equipment from this location at 30 feet to the other location at, say, 200 or 300 feet and get any kind of accurate measurement. And so the two-part test appears constructed, if you forgive my cynicism, to make it difficult to ever really enforce the noise ordinance because of the idea that you'd have to essentially have two enforcement personnel in two locations at the same time. So we're troubled by that. I don't know how you could spend $8,000 to $14,000 on a noise meter. I bought this on Amazon for $60, and it's registering my voice in this room at 70 decibels. And I thought I would show you how hard it is to get to 85 decibels. I mean, this is actually quite challenging. We have this home Bose speaker here, and I'm going to get this to... He's 30 feet away, by the way, if you measure the ceiling tiles. So from where I'm standing, he's 30 feet, and I'm at 75 decibels. It's the best, that's the highest we could ever get it.
Not a pleasant melody. Just
I
for the
like that
record.
tune. That's my ear.
We can't get that speaker to work at 85 decibels at 30 feet, and that was difficult to imagine sitting on one's balcony, sipping a glass of wine, enjoying a fine Fountain Hills evening. Thank you.
Okay.
Are we allowed to address the speakers?
Yeah, let's get through, and then we'll back it
Mark
up.
Saul, followed by John Kirkide.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I'm Mark Saul. I'm also from Tempe, Arizona, member of Carpenter and Hazelwood, Delgado and Bull, and Scott Carpenter is one of my partners. It may be a tough act to follow, but after attending the committee meeting, which I attended about 2-3 weeks ago, it became clear that everyone needed to hear what 85 decibels really was. If you'll see in the committee meeting minutes, it was a 3-2 vote, obviously incredibly close. What the committee meeting minutes may not show is that the motion actually died for lack of a second during the meeting until it was resurrected by the chairperson, who even admitted at the end before voting in favor of it that he even wasn't sure what all the decibels meant and how loud it really would be. So that's why we thought it was incredibly important to actually show you what we're talking about and not just seeing something on a piece of paper. As you'll also see, do you all have the handout showing the different cities? Okay. One thing that's incredibly important, it was brought up, I believe, by the town manager, that some of these ordinances in other cities, are all over the place. That may be true, but Fountain Hills would ensure that you're going to be the loudest city in the state of Arizona. So even though the others might be all over the place, you're clearly going to be louder than each and every one of them. If we can go through each of them, we'll try to go through it quickly. And I'll note, I have 8 of them, and 3 of them are actually college towns. You're going to be louder than all of those as well. That's Tempe, Flagstaff, and Tucson. Phoenix is actually, the measurement point is in the vicinity of the noise, contrary to some of the misstatements that are in the staff packet that talked about 50 feet from the source and this exemption. And what does this exemption even mean? And what does the 70 decibels even mean for this hand-operating devices? Those are the pleasant noises I think we were talking about before, Madam Mayor, like things like ice cream trucks. That's what they're really talking about. So it's not really the 70 decibel test. It's an annoy or disturb the quiet test. So that's a misstatement right there. And annoy or disturb the quiet, I think you can see 85 decibels is going to be well above that range. Go on to Tempe, again, largest college town in the state by far. You're looking at 45 decibels residential, 55 decibels max. You'll see the staff report talks about 70 decibels to try to get a little bit closer. That's still quite a bit away from what you're proposed right now. That's only in industrial zones. That's incredibly misleading. If we're talking about residentials, Tempe is maximum at 55 decibels. Again, you just heard what 75 decibels was. Imagine 85. Imagine at 115, your next door neighbor blaring it in their condo. City of Mesa, again, some misstatements by the staff that there's no maximum decibel. It's actually disruptive and or annoying noise. And the list goes on and on. I think we'd all probably agree Fountain Hills is probably most akin to the town of Paradise Valley. I grew up here. I was raised in Tempe. I remember coming to Fountain Hills when I was younger. I once thought maybe I'll retire in Fountain Hills. Not something I would think of as a noisy town. I would say this is something more like Paradise Valley. And let's look at what Paradise Valley is. It's 56 decibel max, which is what is currently being proposed unless it is changed by one of the council members tonight to 65, 55, 56. That obviously is more reasonable at the door. And I think what you've really seen tonight, it's really not about this two-part test doesn't make a lot of sense. It's all about what it is coming to someone's door when they're outside, having that glass of wine on the balcony, and what effect that's going to have. And I think a lot of this can honestly be summed up that some of this policy really just was ill-advised and not well thought through. And you can see that from the policy that itself. If you'll read with me in your agenda from the actual noise ordinance that may be adopted tonight, you look at section F, and I'm going to read it out loud. Sound truck. It is unlawful to play, operate, or use any device known as a sound truck, loudspeaker, or sound amplifier, radio or phonograph with loudspeaker or sound amplifier, or any instrument of any kind or character that emits loud and raucous noises and is attached to and upon any vehicle unless such person in charge of such vehicle. Just ends. Obviously, this wasn't even thought out to finish this sentence, and this exemption isn't even finished. That's just one of the many problems we have this proposed ordinance, and clearly it needs to go back to staff, and we need to consider just one test, not something where everyone has an $8,000 to $14,000 sound measuring device from two different locations, but no, you have one sound measuring device from the complaining party's residence. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Next.
John Kirkheide, followed by Leslie Kirkheide.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I appreciate the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm very concerned about this.
And you are?
What?
State your name and...
Oh, I'm sorry, John Kirkheide. I'm a full-year Arizona resident, part-year Fountain Hills.
Thank you.
Thank you for the reminder. I'm very concerned about this proposal. One of the things that I find particularly disturbing is we keep talking about this two-part measurement. 85 decibels, we all know, is very high. 55 decibels, we all know, is pretty quiet. The problem with the 55 decibels is it's misleading because it almost never comes into play when you look at the situations that arise in Fountain Hills. How fast does sound drop off? If you're 85 decibels 30 feet from the point of the noise generation, how far away does the wall have to be before it drops to 55? I don't know the exact answer to that because I'm not a sound engineer, but I think it's a long, long ways. So you could be hitting, if I'm on a 40-foot lot, you could be hitting my wall at 80 decibels, and yet you're only 85 at 30 feet, so the 55 decibel measure gets thrown out. And I think that 55 decibel measure will get thrown out just about every time. And at that point, it's simply misleading to even have it in the code. There are other problems with the people mentioned earlier. I also have issues with how this was presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission. The previous speaker mentioned that Tempe is not 70 decibels. That was presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission. It's 55 in a residential area. Second, Mr. Rogers told the Planning and Zoning Commission when he was asked if this was as stringent as our neighboring towns, he said, yes, it is. No, not even close. I think you can look at it, particularly if that 55 decibel is going to get thrown out most of the time. It is way more. And decibels, we all know it's a logarithmic scale. Let me convert that to a base 10. If 55 is 100, then 65 is 200, 75 is 400, and 85 is 800, 8 times. It's a massive difference between 55 and 85, 55 and 70. There are huge differences for small numbers in decibels. I don't think this is a well thought out proposal. I think it's going to hurt the town. I think you'll have a lot of complaints. I think you could hurt the reputation of the town if this gets passed, and there are problems, and I think there will be if it gets passed. You could even hurt the property values. So with that, I urge you to reject this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Leslie Kirkcaldy?
Leslie Kirkcaldy, Mayor and Council. The EPA, if you look at the EPA site, how do you determine the acceptable noise level for residential areas? They say 45 decibels inside, which would be residential now we're talking, 55 outside, and the limit of safety before hearing loss is 70 decibels. You can go to HUD. They say 65 decibels or less is acceptable. They say 65 to 75 decibels is unacceptable. The FAA, significant noise is defined as day-night average sound levels of 65 decibels. So my question would be, with the EPA and HUD, will this stand up? Have you checked it out? And is it likely to result in enforcement action by the feds with complaints? I think 85 decibels is a very ridiculous number, and I really am frustrated with the staff that we're even discussing this, because I think that should have been known before we even got here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, and I think the council had some questions for some of the people who have already spoken. Councilman Magazine, you had, you wanted to speak, have a question of Mr. Dickerson?
Is he MD Acoustics?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. Just a couple of questions.
Sure.
When you did the measurements at Copperwind, what kind of events were you measuring?
First off, this is going to be calculation modeling. So there was talk of, first off, it's called the inverse square law, which allows us to know at a source, if we have a reference distance, we can calculate the noise level out and project it out to whatever distance we want. So the calculation going out to 1,000 feet and telling us what the level would be is very simple mathematics. However, it does not take into account environmental conditions, topography, elevation changes, walls, buildings, everything else, and on top of that, the existing condition or the background without anything in the environment, but maybe, the freeway, the roadways, and the traffic buzz coming off of that. So the very simple fact to come in and use the inverse square law, although it could be somewhat applicable, can also be misleading. The other thing I want to say, too, is a two-part system is absolutely necessary to quantify and to understand what we're listening for. The reason being, and I want to just reiterate this, is this. First off, a $60 sound level meter is not a meter that's ANSI certified and or calibrated and something that would ever stand up in the court of law, which is something that I do on a regular basis. So you have to have a calibrated meter. So whether your officials here who are the police and stuff, they would want to have something that is calibrated. Understand that. Okay. But a two-part system is necessary because to track what the level is at the source and then to understand how that attenuates over the distance and through partitions or walls or over it's imperative. For those consultants that don't do that, that's misleading and can be challenged any day of the week. And yes, I do set meters out there all day long tracking this, and I am more than okay setting meters that are $14,000. I do it all the time. I do it in all states. That's how we make our living, and that's what we do. But to answer it back to your question about the modeling and the measurements.
I'm not asking about modeling.
Okay.
My question wasn't about modeling.
So it's measurements. Do we take the measurements? Mm-hmm. So no physical measurements, but there has been the request to take measurements during an actual event and know exactly what's going on at the resort and taking and actually measuring over a 3 to 5 day process. So we know the background when there's an event and when there's not events and actually looking at this and comparing it to the code proposal.
More specifically, did you measure during events?
We have not measured at the events because this was just brought to us. This was brought to us recently, within the week.
And how would we know? The owner of Copperwind said the proposed ordinance is fine with him. Based on what?
Based on the modeling, we can come in and use 3D modeling and understand that if we use the worst case scenario, which is 85 dB at 30 feet, and inputting this information into the model, we can model this out using mathematics and understanding that. Now, here's the thing.
Wait. Model it out and show what?
And understand how the noise, if you're at 85 dB at 30 feet, what the level will be at each sensitive receptor, in this case at Copperwind, but at any place, you can actually acoustically model this.
Did you model 75 dB?
You can model 75 dB.
Did you, is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I actually did. We modeled it all.
So, I mean, would 60 work? Would 65 work? Would 75 work?
Well,
why are we settled on the 85?
Well, what it does is, let me explain this. A reasonable live venue event, wherever that is in the city or town, whether that's at your parks, wherever, you restrict business from actually being able to operate to have a live band or DJ, and now you start lowering at the source. I mean, 115 would be deafening to anybody, and they would be covering their ears. I mean, this would be putting people in misery. So, also, like the demo showing what the level is here, that's in an indoor environment. So, but to go to go outside and say at 75, look, the bottom line is this: normal events, live DJs and stuff, it's about 95 to 102 decibels at the source. That's the typical live venue. So to put a restriction, and that falls within the window at 85. At 30 dB, 30 feet at 85. I mean, it falls within that window.
I may be wrong, but I thought almost all of the weddings and all the events held at Copperwind were outdoors.
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay, so if there's a wedding outside and there's a band with 10 pieces, what does that tell us? How do you know what it's going to be at 30 feet?
Well, what we do is we look at the source. And we can say at the source, a amplifier or a speaker produces this sort of noise at the source. In the modeling that we used here, we're saying it's 102 decibels at the source. 30 feet away from that, it becomes 85 dB. When you put everything on and you include the atmospheric conditions and the topography and everything else, it becomes 85 decibels at 30 feet. Then when you extrapolate that out to a distance, for example, at the nearest residence, it abides at the 55 decibel level. So as sound attenuates over that distance.
How do you know it's 55 at the nearest residence?
Again, that's how we're using you're using
all modeling.
Modeling, but it's the compilation of the inverse square law associated with.
Dude, don't.
Yeah. I mean, this is scientific, but yeah, I mean, it's a compilation of all kinds of mathematical equations.
Thank you. I think.
Madam Mayor, if I may, and not necessarily directed at you, and by no means am I an expert in any of this, but I had two experts on this committee. And the reason we wrote it up in this way as a two-tier, and respectfully to your model up here, it's somewhat inaccurate. If I live 10 feet away from that source, then I'm still, the second reading at this point has to be 55. So there's no way, so it would be a violation. You couldn't have a 115 decibel event if I live 10 feet away and that says, oh, you're at 75 at 10 feet away, then it's a violation. You'd have to turn it down. And that's how we wrote this up. So whether it's 115, whether it's 120, which those are crazy numbers. 85 is not an outrageous number for a band. The second page that we went out after calibrating a decibel reader was a two-person acoustical band at their finale when they were really jamming out, just hit at 83 decibels, and that was 11 o'clock at night. If you live 10 feet away from that and it was more than 55, there'd be a violation. If you live 40 feet away from there and are more than 55, it's a violation. It doesn't matter. You don't have to get in the minutia of law of diminishing returns and 20 feet into topography. You don't have to get in all that. If this is an apartment building, and we discussed that also, and that's why we didn't write up the ordinance based on separate owned property. It's based on the exterior wall closest to the source. So if you are an apartment above a restaurant, and if they're jamming out, and if it's more than, in this case, 55, it's a violation. But you do have to have the two-part test. Respectfully to your tripod here, that's really not accurate, because if you live next door to the copper wind or the condo next to that source, if you break whatever that threshold is, period, it's a violation. You don't have to get into the minutia of all this other stuff. So really all we're talking about is what the threshold is. Respectfully, you didn't bring up OSHA, which is the biggest regulator of sound, Occupational Safety and Health Administration. 85 is their magic number. 85, if you're over 85, that's where potential over long use, there's danger. Below 80.
That's for 8 hours exposure.
Exactly.
That's 8 hours at 85. That's not just 1 second. I mean, a car driving by can hit 95 decibels.
Well, a television and a dishwasher is 75 decibels. A vacuum cleaner is 80. Garbage disposal is 85. A handsaw. A reception in a lobby area is at 85. By no means, and keep in mind, folks, to give this context, what triggered this 6 years ago when we started this was because at 7 o'clock on a Saturday, some people were calling saying it's too noisy. And so we had to figure out, are they being too noisy? And when we went out, and you heard the captain said, we don't have a problem. But we need to be somewhat objective here and put some standards in the event something happens, that we protect our business community and protect our residential community. But this model right here, respectfully, it's inaccurate. If I'm really noisy right here and the mayor's house is right next to me 2 feet away, if I break that threshold at her house, it's a violation. So it doesn't matter whether you're 10 feet, 20 feet, 50 feet away. As soon as, wherever the closest person is who has an issue, that's what they measure. And so if 55 is the magic number, that's going to be calm at your home. It doesn't matter.
Any other?
Yes.
Councilman Leger? And your question is to Mr. Dickerson or to someone else?
I have questions to several folks.
All right.
And I'm going to start first by asking Councilman Yates to clarify. I want to clarify what
Mr. Dickerson, you can sit down.
I want to clarify what I think you just heard. It's my understanding that you have to meet both tests for it to be a violation.
So if I may, Mayor, so if there's a call, ABC restaurant is too noisy. So whoever the captain...
I understand that. It needs to meet both tests. In other words, it has to be 85 at 30 feet, and it has to be 55 at the wall of the structure of the complainant. Both of those criteria need to be met for it to be a noise violation. Practicality outside of modeling tells me that it's very possible that at 30 feet you can have 85, and that at the wall of the structure it can be greater than 55, which would mean that it's not a noise violation.
No, it is a violation. It would be a violation.
Not the way it's written. The way it's written, it has to be 2 tiers. Both criteria need to be met. That's why I was asked.
It has to be a minimum, so if it's 85 at the source, no harm, no foul. If you go to the complainant and it's 65, it's a violation because you didn't meet the 55, 85 threshold.
Could you clarify that, Bob?
If it's less than 55, same thing. If it's 56, it's a violation.
Okay, I thank you. I understand what you're saying, but we had this conversation the other day on the phone. You told me that both of the criteria need to be violated in order for it to be a violation.
That's my understanding, but I don't give legal advice. Andrew does.
So if that's the case, then I'm simply trying to point out that, frankly, I think we need this. I want to look at something that's well-balanced and fair for not only the businesses, but the residents in Fountain Hills. And we haven't even talked about some neighborhoods where the houses are maybe 10 feet away and you can shake your neighbor's hand. But beyond all of that, this 2-tier thing poses an issue for me because regardless of models, we know in real life it's multivariant. You jump outside of a model and you can have all kinds of factors that can say at the property line, at 30 feet, it's 85, if we accept 85, okay? But between that property line and the property that's complaining, which is referred here to the structure proximate, it could be higher than 55, because there are a variety of variables. When you're in a canyon, when you have wind, I mean, for goodness sakes. So I just want to clarify what I thought I heard you say. And if it was that way, I'd feel a lot more comfortable with it, but it is not that way as it's been written.
Councilman Leger, I just looked more into the way this is written, and you are correct. And the reason it was written that way, if I'm not mistaken, is because if I'm the restaurant, you know, if you're moving above a restaurant that you're going to expect some things. So it shouldn't be to your surprise that there's activity on the weekends and after hours. So in answer to your question, you're absolutely correct. If I'm the noise person, as long as I don't break the 85 threshold, then there's no violation. The way this is written, it's a two-tier. It has to be more than 85, and if Andrew's the complainant, it's got to be more than 55. So if either one of them are less, then there's no violation. And the reason it was written that way was just that. And I tease Dennis all the time because he makes some comments. Everyone who lives around the fountain knew where they're living, or if you move into the downtown area, you knew you were moving in or around a commercial district.
Sure. Let me just pose an example, if I may, Mayor. Let's say it's 85 at 30 feet, and it's 60 at the wall of the structure. Is that a violation?
Yeah, it's over 55.
Yes.
Yes.
No, it's not.
No,
I
it's not.
apologize. You're absolutely correct.
Not the way it's currently written.
Bob. Bob, can you answer that question?
85 and 60, is that what you said? Then it would not be a violation.
Although it violates the highest level at the wall of the structure of the complainant. So that's why I feel that the two-tier, in theory, it makes a lot of sense, but...
Remember that this ordinance is designed to deal with high decibel levels. There's also the disturbing the peace ordinance, which is a separate ordinance, which is what the captain kind of alluded to, where if it's too loud, if it's unreasonably too loud, they can still tell someone to tone it down.
Okay. Well, while you're here, Bob, if I may, Mayor, so it sounds like that both of them need to be violated for it to be a noise violation, which I frankly don't agree with. But beyond that, just a couple questions. And I'm going to direct them to you because I know you've been involved in this, and Councilman Yates, of course, can chime in because he was involved in the subcommittee. I'm trying to understand what our rationale is for increasing our decibel level above our current policy, which the highest level is 79, number one. Number two, why would we want to have a decibel level higher than comparable municipalities? And if we go back to our strategic plan and any survey we've done in the 20 years I've been here, there's a very specific reason why people move to this town. Quiet, peaceful, desert setting. All respect to businesses. But once again, we need to find a balance between business and residents, and I'm not sure this policy does that. You answered the question about the two-tier. The other thing is, Councilman Yates, respectfully, I understand where he's coming from. This council, just through a majority vote, just approved many residents' rentals that are going to be on the avenue of the fountains. So how does this model apply to, I'm on the first floor, a young family with children, and there's a bar below me. I don't understand how this model, what do you measure, from the floor? Or how do you do that? It has to apply to this. And when you travel throughout Fountain Hills in neighborhoods, forget about Copperwind and forget about, casitas and townhomes and all that. I'm talking neighbors. I'm just, anyhow, I just don't think that's going to work. So how does this apply to what we just approved in the Avenue? And here's the oxymoron. This council just approved 2 nursing facilities in downtown area, which is what we'll probably be approving in our overlay very shortly. So this whole thing raises more questions than I have answers at this particular point in time. I think it's well-structured. I think the intent is fine. I could support lowering 85 to 75 and 75 to 65, but even if that doesn't, that's not going to pass this council. This two-test thing is just, it's just flawed. I understand the intent of it. It's just flawed. So, question: how are we going to measure sound on the avenue? Does this not apply to someone that lives above a restaurant?
In your example, my understanding would be that whoever's got the decibel meter would stand outside the business making the noise on the ground floor, and they would go upstairs to the apartment that was making the complaint and take their second measurement.
This process doesn't outline that. I mean, MCSO is not going to understand how to follow that. So if this is passed, we need to, I think, clarify that. Because what we're talking about here in terms of measurement are, distance from the source, wall structures. So I kind of got off on a tangent there, but it's just something we need to look at holistically as it relates to our entertainment district.
As far as the decibel levels themselves, like I said, I'm not the sound expert. That came from the committee originally. I couldn't tell you the rationale other than that they were looking at a variety of options and what actually made certain sounds at certain levels.
And as I recall, Mayor, if I may, what drove that committee to be in place was the significant amount of complaints that were coming from surrounding residents from Fountain Plaza, and specific folks having bands outside and playing. And how did they remediate that? Business owners were smart. They went from rock and roll bands to acoustic music, and there's been fewer complaints since we've done that. We put this in place at Fountain Plaza side. I know one resident is probably going to hear it loud and clear, maybe doesn't care about it, but I think, yeah. Anyhow,
Okay, let me go
that's my 2 cents.
Let me go to Councilman Brown.
Thank you. I do live in the community that when the band strikes up at Plaza Fountain side, I am 330 feet from where the bandstand is. We can hear every note, we can hear every word, and it is a phenomenon that I cannot explain. But the complaints actually came out of the community that we live in, and yes, it's obnoxious. So I closed my door, turned the TV up a little bit, and thank God I'm a little bit hard of hearing, but I managed to live with it. I don't know if it is 55 decibels or 40 decibels, but we do 330 feet away. I'm sorry. It's 300 yards away, 3 football fields. And we hear every note, and I can't tell you why, but it's very unusual. And as far as I'm concerned with this, I'm not intelligent enough tonight to sit and make a motion or come to a conclusion on what's best for our town. I would like to make the recommendation that maybe we have a work study session, and then I'd like to table this for now and bring it back after a work study session to where we can do a little more investigating on our own. I don't believe I'm ready to talk about a double testing system. I'm just not ready for that. So I would suggest tabling it.
Okay. And I guess that's the problem we all have living in Fountain Hills, that we have washes and the sound travels in different ways. And I know that, like I said, I don't live that close to the high school, but I can hear every word from the loudspeaker. I know when it's lunchtime, I hear the bells, I hear the marching band in the morning, and it's just the way the sound travels. And if my windows are open, then I hear it. If I don't want to hear it, I close it and they turn the television up, or usually I'm at work when they're in school anyway. But there's no way I'm going to tell the school to tone down their announcements or tell the band to stop practicing at 6 o'clock in the morning. It's, when I moved there, I knew I was moving that close to a school. You know, we have people that move near the lake, and then they complain that the fountain sprays on their cars. I mean, Councilman Leger said, what happens to someone who moves on top of a restaurant on a bar? Well, we have people on Plaza Fountainside that chose to move on top of the restaurants that we have there, and those restaurants do have music, and they made that choice to buy those condos above those restaurants. And if I were going to buy something above a restaurant, I think I'd figure that it would be up late, they would be open late, there would be a lot of car traffic, there would be noise. You know, you have to have some responsibility for an individual when you purchase a property. You have to know what's around you. You have to know that the empty lot across the street that's commercial is eventually going to be developed, whether you like it or not. And, you know, you're going to come around 5 years later and say, don't build over there because it's spoiling my view. Well, you know, you knew it when you bought the property. So you have to be a little responsible when you decide where you want to live. And please, no, we don't allow any calling out from the audience. I'm sorry, you have to fill out a speaker card. Councilwoman Hanson?
I agree. I think this is a little premature. I appreciated the demonstration we had to actually hear something with our own ears and then be told what that level was. And I think we need more information like that. We're having a lot more events now. I'd be really curious during the ballet in the park, you know, what the decibel levels from that music would be, like even to some of the developments that are on the other side of Town Hall. I've heard from some residents back there that, you know, they asked the question, why are we raising what we already have? And I didn't have an answer for that. And especially when we see the comparisons with other communities that we would have the highest. So I think there's a lot of unanswered questions that leave me not prepared to act on this. And I'd really like some more hard data, which I think we're in a position to do with some of these events coming up. I mean, even, you know, just so we have a frame of reference on what do these numbers mean? What do they really sound like? And to say, well, people shouldn't move to a place, you know, if they want peace and quiet. And, you know, that's counterproductive when we look at, if we say we're trying to attract families, and this is the only place they can afford to live, I think we just need to see, okay, well, they should put up with it, but let's find out what they're putting up with. You know, if we find out that they're upstairs and, you know, it's like at an 85, it's like, well, that's a little bit too much. So I just think we need some more evidence that is something concrete that we can touch, feel, hear before we do anything.
Any other comments? A brief one? Let me go to Councilman Magazine. No? Okay.
Mayor, before I answer that question, I'm an elected official as you are, and I have the right to speak and represent the residents. And if I speak a little longer than you agree to, then I apologize for that. But I will continue to speak as I have been elected and represent the residents. Too often the residents aren't represented, I think, by anyhow. Just real quickly, we're very sensitive to businesses, and we're a very business-friendly council. Frankly, if I was a business owner that was opening Morningstar, or if I was a business owner opening the independent living facilities at Copper Ridge, which we approved, I would be concerned about these particular levels as a business owner in owning those properties. I can't imagine a memory care, independent living facilities, and nursing facilities hearing and tolerating the type of sound that we're talking about here. I'm fine with further study, although we've been studying this since 2011. As I said before, I think the flaws, I could accept this if some of the decibel levels were lowered and the two-tier criteria was eliminated. And once again, kudos to staff and everyone who put all the work into this. I appreciate P&Z. Both your pro and con arguments were excellent, and thank you, Mayor.
Let me go to Vice Mayor first. You got a comment?
Just a comment. I was just going to say I believe the decibel levels are appropriate myself, based on the research that I see here and what was delivered to us. And I also feel, I do agree with Councilman Leger that I think the two-part test, I think it's great. I think it'd be potentially better well situated is that if you fail either one of those tests, that you have actually created a noise violation. But I'm not sure, everybody's perception of, is breathing heavy, a 10, or is my alarm clock louder than yours, is going to be totally different. So I think the decibel levels do not bother me whatsoever. It'd be great. I applaud the staff for putting something together to get something more clarification. It'd be nice if we could push through it, but I think the two-part test is great. I think, if you fail either one, I think you failed at that point.
There.
But
And, all right, Councilman Magazine.
I don't know if the
And I'm not trying to cut anybody off. I'm just trying to not keep getting redundant and just be as concise as possible. Thank you.
Glad you said that before I spoke. I don't know if the comment that it would be allow the highest decibel levels in the state is correct, but based upon, and let me just say also, I applaud everybody that's worked on this, P&Z, staff, Councilman Yates, everybody. This is a very tough issue. But I find myself wondering why we should have the allowance of higher decibel levels that are higher than all of the other towns around us. What's the rationale for that? I really don't understand that. I think, based upon what I've read, what I've heard, based upon what the other towns and cities allow, I just think 85 is excessive. And I'm fine with studying this, having a work study. I'm fine with voting on it if we change the decibel levels. But I'd have a hard time. That 75 decibels that was demonstrated was incredibly loud. And I can't even imagine what 85 would be. But anyway, I'm fine for studying it, but I just think that the 85 is excessive.
Mayor, if I may.
Councilman Brown.
Thank you. I've got a question for Mike Dickerson, please. I don't believe that the town of Fountain Hills is going to jump for a $14,000 device.
No.
Is there some place that we can rent one or two?
Yes, there's actually a manufacturer here in Ahwatukee, actually located. The company's called PCB, Pizio Electronics. They're the company that manufactures a sound level meter called Larson Davis. Those meters are Type 2, ANSI certified, and they can probably give you a good deal because they like to work with municipalities and governments and cities.
You don't have their phone number, do you?
I probably do.
Does it take any kind of expertise to operate these? I mean, we're going to have to actually hire somebody to do this?
No, the sheriff and the police department can learn how to use these, and you can write up a one-page, basically, manual that says, here's how we look at it, here's how we use it. We look at the data, and on the fly. In fact, Peoria does this, Tempe does this, Phoenix does this.
So would we have to hire a band to play so we can see how loud it is? I mean, I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out how we could possibly do this.
You can do it through just looking at anytime you have a live event, you can go back and correlate this.
We'd have to wait till we had a live event. Yeah.
And that's okay.
We've been doing this since
We can do that.
2011.
We have live events.
We'll all meet at Grapables this Friday.
Well, no, I think, being
We'll
a
be at
sea
Dennis's
field
house.
touch type guy, I think that we need to see what's going on in our own town so we can make an intelligent decision. So I appreciate the information on this PCB electronics with the Larson data.
Larson Davis.
Davis?
Davis, yes.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Any other comments or any questions, long or short?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to table this until the council has time to do its own testing so we can represent the public properly.
Second.
All right, and all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mayor, 7-0.
Okay. So since we tabled that, where does that put us with 19?
Still go this one.
Still do it? Okay. Consideration of ordinance 16-10, adopting the Town of Fountain Hills noise regulations by reference and amending the Town of Fountain Hills Town Code, Chapter 11, Section 11-1-7 by revising provisions related to noise violations.
Madam Mayor, that ordinance should be tabled along with the resolution.
Do we need a motion to do
Move to
that,
table.
or?
Move to table.
We should.
Okay. All in favor of
Aye.
tabling? Any opposed? And what about people speaking on that one? We had somebody?
They spoke.
They spoke, so he's not, okay, he's not holding us to that. Okay, items 20 to 21, one staff report with comments by the public taken during number 20. Open the public hearing. To receive comments on ordinance 16-08, amending the Town of Fountain Hills zoning ordinance, Chapter 5, Section 5.19, and Chapter 18, Section 18.06, by revising provisions related to noise violations, case number Z 2016-05. Grady?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, 1608 is all of the zoning ordinance changes that were the counterparts to the changes to 1117. So you can remove them, but what you'll be left with is the current language of 1117, which is 2 paragraphs, one of which contains the sound truck provision that was referenced before with the town manager waiver that was supposed to be cut off the end of it, and a general noise provision that doesn't really have any decibels. So it's the council's decision. And right now we have 2 competing provisions. We have a town code provision that has 2 paragraphs that are somewhat just judgment based, and then we have actual decibel levels set out in the zoning ordinance that refer to all these different sections. So my recommendation is keep status quo in your zoning ordinance until you fix your 1117, so that 1608 should probably be tabled as well. 1604 that follows it is a little bit of a different story, but we can talk about that when we get to it, if you want to discuss tabling 1608.
Okay, so we need a motion to table.
So moved.
Second?
Okay, and we have a speaker? Yes, we have 4 people who want to speak on this, okay?
Bill Hines, followed by Mike Dickerson. Scott Carpenter, followed by Mark Saul.
I think they left. They left.
No, they're in the back. They said they passed.
So
They all passed.
They passed.
they all pass? Mike and Mike is,
Just one more clarification, if that's okay, just 1 minute. On the test that was just provided to you, part of the problem with the test is that you are indoors, and we are comparing something that is outdoor made. So when you are something with reflective surfaces like we have, that becomes problematic in the terms of just a simple test. So I just want to keep that in mind for you guys, okay?
anybody else?
Scott Carpenter.
Scott Carpenter?
2 things. One, my earlier comments apply. The comment I would make about what the sound expert just said is that when you take something simple like how loud something is and couch it in, you never really know how loud something is. You've got to have a $14,000 machine. What you heard isn't real because it's indoors. This is why we did the demonstration, and I think it's a little insulting to suggest that it takes a scientist or an engineer or an expert to tell you when something's loud. Thank you.
Okay. Sure.
I mean, I guess I just don't understand how you wouldn't imagine being in a box would affect the sound as compared to a neighborhood. I don't need an answer. I'm just saying, we're in a box where the sound comes in, so I hear what you're saying, but
I know I can hear people across the wash. I can hear their voices, and the wash is really far away.
I live about
It's the
4
way
miles
sound
from Fort
travels.
McDowell, and I can hear the concerts, too, so.
Yeah, it's the way the sound travels. It's
just
very
what we want.
unusual
It's what the citizens
in
want.
Fountain
That's what it
Hills.
boils down to.
Okay, we have no more speakers? No, okay. So we tabled this. Yes, we did.
Nope.
Then
In
we-
the first and the second, you went to speaker cards.
Oh, I did say all in favor. No one heard that? No. Okay, all in favor of tabling?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mayor, 7-0.
Okay. Yes, you want, I have to close the public hearing. You can still say something, you know, the
Thank you.
public.
Okay.
Go right ahead.
We've now tabled all of this, and we have to take some affirmative action
We got one
to take
more.
it, to take it off the table. I just want to know what we're going to do going forward.
Okay, well, we've got one more. We've got consideration of ordinance 16-08 is just presented. And is this 16? 08. We tabled 1606. So I have 1608. Is that supposed to be 04?
Make sure I get the numbers right. We tabled.
Number 21.
1610
Uh-huh,
and 1608.
right.
1604 has not yet been discussed.
And Mr. Rogers is about to give a staff report on that.
Okay, I've got written here under 20 that it was 1806. And,
That's a section in the zoning ordinance.
okay, got it.
So Mayor, we're going to open the public hearing on number 22.
So what are we doing on 21? Is it just, do we have to table that?
That was the one just tabled.
I thought we tabled 20.
20 and 21.
Okay, all right.
Madam Mayor, if I may, 20 was a public
Public
hearing.
hearing.
There was no
Uh-huh.
motion taken.
I just closed the public hearing and said consideration of ordinance 16-08 as just presented. I just now closed the public hearing, so,
Can we check the minutes?
The vote was taken in the public.
Yeah.
We opened the public hearing at 8:01, closed at 8:05, and there was a tabled motion by Councilmember Magazine, seconded by Councilmember Hanson. Everyone voted in the affirmative.
okay. So we're on 22 to 23, one staff report, comments taken on 22. I'm opening that public hearing. To receive comments, we're on a different topic here. On ordinance 16-04, amending the Town of Fountain Hills zoning ordinance, Chapter 12, commercial zoning districts related to outdoor entertainment, adding a new Chapter 25, entertainment overlay district, and amending the official zoning district map, case number Z 2016-02. Bob?
Thank you, Mayor. The Downtown Entertainment Overlay District proposal is the second part of the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendations. The subcommittee specifically recommended allowing all the businesses in the downtown area to establish outdoor seating, entertainment, or dining areas if they wished. Downtown businesses located on the south side of the avenue and in Plaza Fountainside are located in the TCCD zoning district, and so they are already permitted to do this. But downtown businesses located on the north side of the avenue are located in either C2 or C3 zoning districts, which don't allow for outdoor entertainment areas. The Commission's intent with this overlay district is to allow consistent regulations for all the businesses in the downtown regardless of the zoning district. Ordinance 1604 amends the zoning map by establishing a defined boundary for the downtown entertainment overlay district. The ordinance also creates the new chapter 25 in the zoning ordinance that outlines the overlays regulations. Outdoor entertainment will be permitted in any establishment that has a dedicated outdoor seating area for food and/or beverage service. Music will be allowed in those areas. It allows the use of public sidewalks with an appropriate encroachment permit, similar to what we did with Sofritas. It still requires compliance with the state liquor control regulations, and it still requires compliance with the town's noise regulations, which we almost finished discussing earlier. This is a map of the proposed overlay boundaries. It begins this area here, which is the end of the Copper Ridge. This is the commercial end of the Copper Ridge development at La Montana and the Avenue of the Fountains. Goes up La Montana Boulevard to Palisades, down to Saguaro, down, take Saguaro back down to the Avenue, and then back up. So it's these 4 lots of Plat 208, plus that the end cap of the Copper Ridge development. All the properties within this boundary would be in the overlay district. Planning and Zoning Commission forwarded a recommendation to approve the downtown entertainment overlay district as presented. They did vote unanimously on this one. Staff also recommends that council approve this ordinance 1604 as presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Do we have any speaker cards on this item?
No, Mayor.
We don't. Council discussion, questions for Bob? Councilman Leger?
Thank you, Mayor. Bob, you just mentioned with respect to noise, we're kind of out on left field because we didn't approve what was presented, but we do have a noise ordinance, Chapter 5, Section 19, that has measurement levels on it. I would imagine that that would be applicable to the entertainment district until we develop a new standard. Is
Actually, both ordinances, also the one in the town code, would still be applicable.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Bob? Any other council discussion? And we have no speaker cards. So I'm going to close the public hearing. Consideration of ordinance 16-04 is just presented.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Move as presented. Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mayor, 7-0.
And council discussion direction to the town manager. I guess this is where Councilman Magazine was talking about what's our next step.
That's the question.
That's the question, is direction to, well, I think that Grady understands that we are interested in acquiring this equipment and doing the testing ourselves. The only thing that I would like to suggest is that we don't wait that long before we do this, because the businesses are right now in a season where they're going to, people want to sit outside and they want to have music, and this is when they make their money. So I really don't want to drag this out any longer than we absolutely have to.
Mayor, maybe one way to start would be making a list of our upcoming events, because those will give us actual things to test. And that way, set up a schedule of how this testing can be done, and then decide where the area, the criteria area of, where we want to test from to see how it impacts the people around the downtown.
Okay. Councilman Yates, suggestion?
I was going to, along the same lines, page 2 of your handout was kind of a timeline of just exactly what Councilwoman Hanson just brought out. Special events are a great idea, but as Councilman Brown pointed out, just the daily things that go on, if we just go and hit the spots that have bands or DJs or things like that and kind of make some measurements. So are we saying we as a council are going to do this, or we're asking staff to go perform this? 'Cause not that I don't mind hanging out with everybody on a
what
meeting,
We were starting at your house, I see.
Come on over.
So basically what I'm hearing is kind of what I was thinking along the same lines. Also, I think it might be helpful, when is Copperwind's next outdoor event?
Yeah, that's
The
what I was
weather's
just
turning
gonna
nicer now, and
One
that'd
with
be
an
very
open
helpful.
bar.
So there's 2 ways to do it. I mean, we have a wedding this weekend.
Okay.
Would a bride want the town council to come to her wedding?
Well, we won't all.
That's not where we're going. I was just going to say, you have a sound expert here who could actually measure real sound.
On our wedding lawn, when we bring in a DJ and bring in a sound person with a
Right.
meter and do the measurements and give everybody a feel for what is reasonable. Yeah, I think it's reasonable. What, if one of your family members was having a wedding, what would you expect that
All right.
to be at?
Mayor?
Does that work?
Councilman Magazine?
Yeah, I'd like to ask Grady, in addition to renting the equipment and doing some measurements, is there anything else you think we should do to help make a decision? Is there any further analysis or anything?
I'm going to get with Bob. I think what I'm hearing from the council, there was some point of discussion about the two-step, and then the other part was perhaps the 85 was too high. Maybe somewhere where we're at now, to somewhere in between where we're at now to 85. So I think those are going to be something that we'll look at, particularly since the cities in the valley do not have that kind of methodology, although we're hearing it's not uncommon to have that elsewhere in this country. So I would like to also, and I wasn't necessarily suggesting that your independent sound engineer or acoustic engineer necessarily measure it, although you're welcome to do that. But we could also rent the equipment while that's going on and just do a test and do a field test and validate that information. If not this weekend, maybe the next one, because I don't think we have enough time to plan for it. We also have, Captain Letourneau had checked with another district that also has decibel meters. They have made that available to us to borrow. And so we will borrow those, but we know we're going to have to invest in them. And I don't think that they're going to cost as much as $8,000, but they're going to be pricey with whatever we buy. And to the point of the acoustic engineer, anything we do in the future, that might be challenged. You have to make sure you have properly calibrated equipment that's generally accepted in the law enforcement community to be able to hold up in court. So.
And someone who really knows how to operate it.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So, Bob, did you have anything else that you're wanting to add? So we'll come back with a plan and we'll communicate it to you. And I think we definitely want to come back with some revisions to what has been proposed to you tonight.
Well, and the only thing I want to add is that rather than saying, I definitely don't want to go 85, I'm looking at 80, I think I'd like to Let's see exactly where the music's at.
We're going to have field tests
Let's
for that.
exactly see that, and let's not set and say, we don't want the 85. We're going to look at where is 80 or whatever. Let's listen to the music and see exactly what it is outside. It makes a big difference when it's
I
outside.
did have one more comment. Is the decibel levels that you adopt aren't necessarily the problem. The problem, if you look at some of the other towns, they've adopted, the things that are the problems are the exemptions that they made. I mean, we don't have an airport. I guarantee you every airport around us is a lot louder than any of these decibel levels we're talking about. We don't have a train going through. So there are those exemptions that they offered up in other locations are not something that we're offering up at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Mayor, sorry
Right.
to prolong this, I would hope we would try to measure more than just music. If we can find some other examples of things where there's, loud noise, whether it's a crowd of people, whatever it is, so that we have,
Just kind of get a base.
Sorry?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we have a baseline of, which is, I think what the original committee did.
To your point, like on the corner of Saguaro and El Lago, just opened and sat on the corner, and it was 75. No music was heard, but just the noise of the sounds of Fountain Hills.
But it comes and goes.
You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah. Okay.
So I believe we have clear direction from the council. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, then I'm going to move on to activities. If there's anything that you wanted to talk about, I've got a couple of things I need to mention. Okay. I did want to mention the Fountain Hills Athletic Boosters. They have a new president, John Hoyt, and he's approached me about the town partnering more with the school for joint activities, and I think it's a great idea. I did join him for the first pre-football game tailgating party, and as I mentioned before, we also joined them for Red Ribbon Day. Ballet Under the Stars, I hope you didn't miss that because it was a huge success for our town. We had both residents and visitors in Fountain Park. By 6 o'clock, the park was already full. I do want to congratulate Rachel and Grace for the wonderful job that they did there at our town booth, giving out surveys, glow sticks for the kids, and the Experience Fountain Hills bracelets. And it was a pleasure to welcome the crowd and use just that few minutes to promote Fountain Hills. We had a great Oktoberfest. It was I opened that by tapping the keg, and that's always fun. But it was great that the music that they played there, which was pretty loud. It was German and Polish music, and both from our sister cities. I do want to mention the fire department and thank them for the great tour that they gave my Mayor's Youth Council. They really enjoyed it. And I know that Chief Ott helped to arrange that. Thank you. And the kids just had a great time. They got to try on the gear, and they got to go in the fire truck and see all the apparatus, and they just had a really great time. There was a big opening in Phoenix at the Capitol Museum by a master artist, Chris Ho. He's from Taipei, Taiwan. And I was asked to go, and I was asked to be there as a speaker. It turned out I not only represented Fountain Hills, but also District 23, since Senator Kavanaugh wasn't able to attend. This artist is famous the world over for his paintings of an endangered species animals. And it was great. They had a few school groups there also, and he did a demonstration for the children, which they really enjoyed. So it was a pleasure to represent our town at that event. And that is all that I have. If there's anything, nothing else, then I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
Mayor, so moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?